In this video, I'll give you an overview of what I'm thinking about in order to create production-ready concept art. I'll be focusing on designing a sci-fi access terminal and UI in Photoshop, and I'll be talking about how I like to use references, storytelling, and a production mindset when I'm bringing these concepts to final in order to get them ready for film or games production. So let's jump right in. And so in the background, I'm just going to be finishing up this concept here and making sure I have it production ready. So I'll be working on some UI design for this screen, for this access terminal. So what makes a piece of concept art production ready? Well, in short, it's basically bringing it to a point where you can hand it off to a production team and they can build it without having to ask any questions about how it's made. So your modelers, your texture artists, UI artists or 2D artists, rigging team, animation team have all of their questions answered. So you'll see later on, there's going to be a real focus on just double checking I've included everything I need to include in these other concept panels here. So at the moment, I'm working on some corporate logo designs for the screen UI. And in my mind, I'm thinking a lot about the story for this environment. So I'm designing these for a dark sci-fi FPS game where there's a mining outpost. So as I'm designing these, I have my reference board up on the side and I'm referencing some designs and aesthetics from mid-90s ATMs. And I'm using that kind of intentionally. The purpose is twofold. On the one hand, it helps really ground my designs in some kind of realistic aesthetic and makes them grounded and relatable for the players so they can pick up on the design cues from objects like this that they've seen in the real world. They'll automatically know what the function of the object is. Also, I'm kind of using these references as a jumping off point that ties in with the story. So in the area that this terminal would exist, I've kind of created a backstory for myself that I can think about while I'm designing this stuff, and it really helps me generate more interesting ideas. So with something like this access terminal is part of a complex that's owned by a joint military and commercial industrial mining operation. So I'm kind of riffing on the idea that this mining and reconnaissance corporation kind of has a monopoly on some asteroid mining outposts. So they handle their own mining. They also handle their own security. I guess I'm also riffing on some of the corporations in the Alien universe as well. But I really want to reference in this design some kind of rough and ready industrial aesthetic with a few hints at their military and guns for hire type background. Also leaning into the storytelling of being a corporate monopoly. So in things like the screen UI, I thought it'd be fun to include things like overdue fees for mining equipment or weapons that these grunts have to check in and check out at the start and finish of their work days. I just thought that was quite funny, almost like an overdue library card. So in terms of font, I'm leaning into almost a kind of a very military situation report type text in terms of the layout. I'm also leaning into those old mid-90s ATM UIs as well, where it's kind of very clunky, like it's probably not a touch screen. They probably still have to use a keyboard to manually select these different options. And so all of those cues are kind of adding to the overall feeling of the place. So the reason I'm defining this screen UI in the first place is because as I was opening up the rest of these concepts, I started by asking myself, would a production team have everything they need to build this? So I was looking specifically at the keypad and the screen. I came to the realization that at some point, someone's going to need a design for this screen UI. I had designed this sort of grid-like keyboard layout, but also needed to create symbols for it. So making sure I included those. Also making sure I'm including any notes where necessary to accompany some of the references I include, just to make it really clear what I'm picking up on so that they can also pick up on the same things as they're building it. So these concepts, for the most part, a big focus for me was efficiency and speed. So I probably sat down for roughly 2 sessions. So in terms of my process, I stuck exclusively in Photoshop for this one, and I was relying more heavily on callouts to communicate things about the designs that I wanted to convey. And a lot of production concept art is just this, especially for things like set dress props. It's more about how do I get from A to B in the most efficient way possible. So sketching really fast and loose in 2D is the absolute fastest way to get from A to B, while still making it really clear how this is going to get built. So let's summarize. So we have clearly communicated design that is easily interpretable, accompanied by some material callouts or object callouts, including any kind of cutaways to show things that are occluded, any more specific items that are part of the design that need breaking out, including any notation about certain references and what you want other artists in the production team to be paying attention to. This one's an optional part of portfolio pieces. I certainly wouldn't include it in every concept that I put in my portfolio, but it can be a nice to have, and definitely including your thumbnail sketches and references to showcase where you started and what your goals were, so the art director can compare that to the final result, and they'll be able to assess, okay, how capable is this artist of understanding a brief and a set of references, translating that into a new design. So most of what you can see here are pretty standard steps in a process in the concept art for production process. So if you're looking to add some designs to your portfolio, these are really going to sell your ability to solve problems to a production team for an art director. They'll be able to look at something like this and say, okay, I can see that this artist is thinking about story, integrating the story with the references, that they understand the references, and that they also understand the concept process and are interested in helping a production team. And if you're interested in a very efficient sketching process in Photoshop, check out this video here.